Hello, and welcome to the 100th episode of Recluse Horror. This is no longer a daily podcast. With me today, again, is Sam.
Hey.
So a little background on the podcast. Back on my birthday, a little over a year ago, I decided I wanted to watch and review a horror movie every single day. I did so for the entire year. I'm no longer doing daily episodes. But I had to do one for Friday the 13th in April, which is when my birthday was. So obviously I had to do one today. Today I decided, I actually gave Sam two choices. I gave him one, that I've been trying to get him to watch that I watched by myself for like 1,000 years. Or I wanted to rewatch, what was probably, at least in a lot of respects, my favorite out of all of the movies that I saw this year. I figured, even though I had seen it before, it might be neat to watch it a second time and to actually be able to talk about it on the podcast. And so that's what we did. So we watched Martin from 1978. Now, Sam did see that one with me. He did not pick the one that he hadn't seen that I've been trying to get him to watch because he hates me. Is that right? That's why?
Yes, that's correct.
No, he was sleepy and didn't want to read subtitles, and it was one of the ones with subtitles. Hopefully I'll get him to watch it sometime soon. But yeah, no, it's a good one. It's a good one. Sam, how did you like Martin from 1978?
I enjoyed it very much.
This would be funnier if they could see your face, probably.
No, thank you.
Martin it's a rare non-zombie movie written and directed by George Romero. We watched this back on day 52 of my whole thing, so we watched it on the 30th of May, 2017, and it's definitely one that stuck with me. Probably there's a few that are definitely better movies. There's some that I enjoyed more on different levels. But this one was such a surprise that it was going to be this good. Not that I don't like George Romero and think that his zombie movies are kind of awesome. I do love the original Dawn of the Dead movies. Not as big of a fan of Night of the Living Dead, which I know is
I really like Night of the Living Dead. I know. I like it the best,
it's
actually.
It's like a controversial opinion. Sam wouldn't even let me finish my sentence.
I probably like Martin
so controversial.
better.
Yeah.
Than Night of the Living Dead, but...
Good. Yeah, me too. I definitely do. I like this better than any of them. And in fact, George Romero, which if you hadn't heard, passed maybe 6 months ago? Was it something like that?
Something like that, I don't remember exactly.
Till basically the day he died, he said Martin was the favorite movie that he had ever made. And having seen this, I totally understand why. So the movie, basically in the film, it's about a young man that's convinced that he's a vampire. That goes to live with his elderly and superstitious cousin who wishes to cure him of his vampirism one way or another. It also contains a rare acting performance by practical effects master Tom Savini and actually George Romero himself as well. I want to save I want to reserve any opinions based on this viewing that we did today, like comparatively to the one that we did before, till the end of the podcast, just so that we're aware. Don't do comparative, just talk about like how you enjoyed it and the things that you liked and what you picked up on. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make any sense to you?
It makes sense. It doesn't seem like something I can do.
Yeah, is it hard to do? I don't
remember. It's been...
Yeah.
6 months?
Yeah, it's been like 300 days. It's been over 300 days.
It's longer than 6 months.
Yeah, we watched it on the 30th,
like a year ago,
30th
almost.
Of May. The 30th of May. Yeah, so almost a year ago, like 11 months ago or something. So before we get too far into this, I will say... if you have any problem watching, non-consensual, sexual contact, this is not your movie. There are definitely a few scenes that are gonna be pretty rough for you. So it's honestly, it's fairly tame compared to what I've seen in other movies, but that doesn't mean, like, it's almost creepy on a different level, the way that those scenes play out in this movie, would you say?
Yeah, it's very weird,
Mm-hmm.
to say the least.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, yeah, if you have trouble watching that, this is probably not your movie. I wouldn't suggest watching this movie, unless you really feel like you want to fight through it, and it's not necessarily, like, don't hesitate to turn it off.
In a way, it's a big part of the
that.
movie, also.
It is, yeah. So even though
like,
it's
the scenes aren't terribly graphic.
No.
But the theme is very strong in the movie.
Right. It is. It is a very central point to it, even though it's not terribly graphic, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of screen time either. I would say 10 minutes out of the whole hour and 35-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
Hour and 36. So, I mean, it's definitely something that you should consider, at least, before jumping into this one. So there aren't many special effects to speak of in this movie, mainly just blood. So there's really not much to be said on that front. It's that really bright blood they had at that point in the 70s, where it almost looks like paint or candle wax or something like that. Like, it's viscous and really red. What did you think about that? For this movie,
it's weird. I like the way it looks in this movie.
Specifically.
Yeah, specifically. Yeah. Also, I guess this, Romero wanted to make this movie in black and white, totally in black and white. Mm-hmm. But the producer didn't want to, and stuff like that. Because,
just like The Crow.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But yeah, it's very bright. It doesn't bug me. Yeah.
It definitely doesn't look realistic, but I think it's kind of intentional for contrast. Like, he probably figured, like, if it's gonna, I mean, this kind of blood was pretty common back in the late 70s, mid 70s, I'd say. But I feel like he figured, like, if I'm not going to be able to get black and white, I might as well have something contrasted. And there is a lot of black and white in this. They not to the level that The Crow did. For those of you that don't know The Crow, The Crow was another movie that the producers wanted to film in black and white, or the filmmakers wanted to, rather, film it in black and white because the comic was in black and white. If you didn't know, it's based on a comic book. And they wouldn't let them. They said, basically a black and white movie is not going to sell. So instead, they just made everything black and white anyway by just making all the sets black and white. This doesn't do exactly that. There's definitely color in there, but most of it is very neutral tones or very dark tones. There's not a whole lot of middle ground on that in a lot of the scenes. Would you say that's correct?
It's very drab.
Yeah.
I can't remember where it was filmed, but it's
all the houses are stark white and
and old, not freshly painted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's very drab in that way, like late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the pacing in this one is pretty slow, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I think it's worth getting through. If you do decide to watch this one and the stuff that we mentioned before that might, bug you, doesn't turn you off of it, make sure you get it all the way to the end, because the end definitely is what ties the whole movie together thematically, and, just the whole point of the story is in the very final moments, the last 35 seconds of the film.
We're going to talk about it now?
Are as much important to this movie as any other 35 seconds in the movie. There's no like falling action or anything like that, like they would have in certain scripts. It really, like, it goes all the way to the end. Every part of that movie is pretty important, despite being fairly slow.
I would say this is one of those movies where you watch it and you're like, okay, well, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. But then you get to the end and you're like, oh, that was actually really good.
Yeah. And it does. It really, like, without the ending, not specifically, it didn't have to be that ending, but without the ending on it, the movie, I think part of that is because, like, it more asks questions about the themes that it goes into than it does, like, give any answers to it. So until you have something to sort of punctuate it and you know, put a point on it, there is no movie. It's just a bunch of questions with no movies. It ends up being something like a David Lynch movie or something, if you don't put an ending on it. And they did. And I think the ending is really, I thought the ending is good. I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but did you like the ending?
Yes, that's what I started
saying. Yeah. So Martin, the character Martin, is played by, he was then a first-time actor. His name is John Amplas, or I think that's how it's pronounced. He does a very good job. He's supposed to be, you know, sort of naive and disassociated from the world as a whole, which kind of makes sense given his circumstances. And his family life is very obviously indicated as one of the reasons for both this and the possible reasons why he may believe he's a vampire, if he's not one. There's a lot of different themes in this movie, and I actually did a text review of this one before. Like I said, I've already reviewed this one as a part of my, like, you know, new review a movie per day thing. But I gave a lot more detail in that review than I really feel like I want to give at this point. I will just say, like, there's a lot of themes in this that are really important that really tie the movie together. It talks about faith and superstition and tradition and a lot about the sort of personalities you see, you know, disparate types of personalities. There's a lot about grooming and sexual assault, and I mean, there's any number of different themes in this.
Mental health issues.
Definitely mental health issues.
Like family relations.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Being a teenager.
Yeah, and even within the mental health realm, there's a lot more than just.
It's not that's
one theme.
Mm-hmm, yeah, there's a number of different facets to that theme that are really important. Again, like a lot of these themes, they don't really get any hard, definite answers on very many of these themes. Like as far as like which way the filmmakers are leaning. Again, they're just asking questions, and I think they did that in a very good way, a very important way, which seems a lot more subtle than I usually feel like you get out of George Romero. Maybe it's just because some of his later films have a different sort of violence, where the violence in the movie is a lot more meaningless than it is in this.
I think it has a lot of social commentary, and that's specifically why I like Night of the Living Dead this. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, like Dawn of the Dead and...
well, that has
some,
yeah.
But I just feel like it's not as important to the story. Yeah. Right. It's in there, but it's not like the main focus.
Yeah.
Of the story where I feel like both of these are.
I would say that Martin really has two central focuses, which is like the whole like vampirism angle. Like, is this person a vampire? If not, why do they think they're a vampire? Why does, you know, what's his name? Kuda? Mm-hmm. Why does Kuda, he's the cousin or whatever. Why does Kuda think he's a vampire? But yeah, I would say like all of those questions. And then, I mean, the whole central point of this movie is questions, both that question and the questions about like, what are the effects of like, you know, of, again, faith, of, superstition, mental illness, you know, self-righteous morality, like all of the different themes that they explore there are big question marks, that they want you to sort of draw your own conclusions to in pretty much every case. You know, there's like two answers in this whole movie, and a lot of the rest of it is completely ambiguous, I would say. What did you think about like the cinematography and the editing and all of that? Just the actual like technical aspects of the film, the lighting and stuff.
I thought they were really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One could argue not very good in some respects, but I thought they were really interesting. The things they chose to focus in on and cut to and cut away from. there's a few things that seem a little stale.
Yeah.
But there's some things that seem really good. Specifically just like cutaways to like actions of people doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Even the like what I always like call B-roll of like random things that they were like, hey, let's film that. That would probably look cool. are pretty cool. They were like, yeah, that is that kind of helps the movie along, opposed to where a lot of B-roll like that is like a waste of time and doesn't help.
Right. Yeah.
You feel anything for the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I felt like, and this is a warning to any potential, people who'd be interested in watching this movie. The first 5 minutes or so are cut together really poorly for reasons that I really don't understand. There are some really sharp cuts. There's some really bad ADR dialogue.
You're talking about the train scene?
Yeah. Not even the whole train scene, just like the very beginning of it, is very, very, for some reason everything is abrupt. I think they probably didn't get enough shots of what they were trying to get.
I assume they got too many shots.
And didn't know what they wanted to use, so they just cut a bunch of.
The original cut of this movie is 2 hours and I think 45 minutes.
Oh, wow. I'd kill to see that.
Yeah, 45 minutes. So I assume that could be why.
Yeah.
I assume that's why. But
they had too many good shots that they wanted in.
But yeah, the original cut is 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Wow. Is that available anywhere? Do you know?
I don't know. I've never seen
it. I would love to see more of this, to see more of what they had for this movie. Yeah, okay. Well, that could be too. Like, maybe they had too much stuff but yeah, the editing is really clumsy in the very first part of it. I don't even know if it is the first whole 5 minutes. Stick with it. Definitely don't let that turn you off, because it's a very small part of it. After that, most of the editing is pretty good. I think the lighting is a little bit bland for the most part, but it creates that contrast. The whites and the blacks, and then the color in between it. So it's a little bland, but I feel like in purpose in a certain sense to make it feel drab. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting, even to this day, it's an interesting take on like a vampire story. Oh, very much so.
Like cutting away from like the glamour of being a vampire that has become a more and more thing, and even was a thing. Yeah, even back then. Yeah, even Dracula like glamorizes being a vampire, and this, so like the like grungy, gritty, like gross, like like film texture that it has. Mm-hmm. Like I think helps the movie a lot, and what it's trying to say and be. Yeah. Yeah, it really cuts away from a lot of the romanticism of vampires. It even kind of calls to that. Yeah. Oh, and it acknowledges them. Yeah, for sure. It does. Yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect of it, actually. The just the contrast of this story to many other vampire stories. And actually, you didn't see this one. It's another one that I've been trying to get you to watch, kind of less than the other one, because I think you would probably enjoy the other one a little bit more. And I have actually already reviewed this on one of my solo episodes, but The Transfiguration takes a lot of notes from this movie. Transfiguration, I think it was from 2016 or 17. Very, very good movie. Does again, takes a lot of hints from this and another movie, but acknowledges it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't feel like they're just like trying to rip off these other stories, because it's like, no, this is like kind of a love letter to vampirism while also being more realistic to like the circumstances and everything. Now the first time that we watched this movie, Sam, you and I came away with entirely different opinions about the ending of the movie, or about what one particular aspect of the movie. Right. Do you hold with your opinion there? I don't even remember what it was.
Okay, I'll pause. So do you keep that? Do you maintain that opinion about this movie?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
I think to a certain extent it is secondary. It's something that you don't need to have an answer on, but I still hold with my opinion too. So yeah.
I don't remember your opinion, but I'm sure it was good.
It was the opposite of yours.
I'm sure it was good. Your opinion's so good.
It was the absolute opposite.
I'm kidding.
Of yours.
Her opinion is terrible.
So was there anything that you picked up on this one that you don't remember from the or not that you don't remember, because there was one particular scene that neither Sam or I remember for no
really
reason.
Weird, right?
And we remembered the scene right after it.
And we're pretty sure it's the same cut.
Yeah.
Because there's the long cut.
Uh-huh.
And then there's supposed to be another version that has different music to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe we watched the same one.
I remember
twice.
that music. Yeah.
But yeah, there's this whole scene that we just
neither of us remembered, and the scene after it has to have had the scene that happened before it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. And we remember the scene after it.
It's not a terribly interesting scene. Also,
it's not the best scene in the movie.
I think it's like one of the not great. I think and necessary scenes.
No, I was going to say, I think it kind of works counter to some of what it's trying to talk about in the movie.
Yeah, right.
To have it happen in that place in the story. So
there's probably a longer version.
Yeah.
Since there's apparently everything in this is supposed to be longer. I don't know.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
But the most thing about it that I noticed, and maybe I even noticed why it's been so long, is that Martin's doing Martin has a real Luke Skywalker from A New Hope thing going.
Are you talking about his hair or his wide-eyed stare?
I was talking about his acting, but yeah, those two.
Yeah. Yeah, the hair and the wide-eyed stare.
There's a lot of I'm going to... I can't do
a good Luke Skywalker. A good Mark Hamill.
Yeah, from A New Hope. It's just
Yeah. I think in this movie it totally works for the role. I can't imagine, if they made a remake of this movie, I can't imagine who they would get to do that part. That would infuriate me.
I didn't say it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just comparable.
Yeah.
And when I was like, hey, this is
mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's all. And it was made a year later.
This was made a year after Star Wars? Oh, okay. Yeah. I really personally I enjoyed it quite a bit. His acting.
Oh, I liked his acting too. I just noticed the similarities. I don't know if it was intentional or just the way people perceived naive characters at the time.
Yeah.
A New Hope people love that.
Yeah.
I like it. I'm not one of them, but people do love it.
Yeah, well, A New Hope was my favorite for the longest time. So yeah, you're not gonna. I get how Mark Hamill's acting in that movie isn't the greatest facet of that movie, and that particular aspect doesn't always add to the story. His acting in that regard, that wide-eyed, staring down the camera, staring down the audience, staring down something, doesn't work in all scenes. In this, I feel like that's really a part of his personality and his character. I've known people who have that same look on their face that obviously don't believe themselves to be vampires, but do have actual mental health problems that just kind of look like that a lot.
Yeah, the story of A New Hope isn't
mentally ill child.
Yeah, it's Luke Skywalker thinks he's a Jedi.
Right.
But no one's sure.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Actually,
they clear that up pretty.
Actually, this has a lot in common with A
New Hope. Mm-hmm. What are you about to say? He has a smug look on his face and he knows I like A New Hope. So, what are you going to say about it?
Okay, so Martin's Luke, right?
Right. Established.
Coda, Obi-Wan Kenobi,
I guess.
Christina, Princess Leia. Throw some droids in there.
Yeah. I don't.
Get yourself a movie.
Disagreement.
What do you mean? How do you disagree with that?
I disagree with that. I don't think that Coda really stands in for that.
I don't think any of that.
Kudo, not Coda. Kudo.
Okay, I don't think any of that has any merit whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay.
It was just a funny thing to say.
Because you're a mean
and the archetypes exist in that movie in a certain way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Usually it's mostly demographic wise, but yeah. What did you think about the rest of the acting? What did you think about like Tom Savini and the rest of the cast, I guess, besides John Amplas?
John Savini's good. He doesn't have a terribly big part.
Tom Savini.
Yeah, sorry. And what is it? Kuda. He was really good. He does a lot of good acting not when he's not speaking.
Mm-hmm. He does, yeah.
If you look at him, he's acting like the whole time
mm-hmm.
as that character, even when he's not talking, and there's just
mm-hmm.
like shots of him.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would say the same about Martin.
I would say it too, but it's
less
so
acting.
intense.
Yeah. His is intense.
His is so intense.
Yeah, is intense.
And like for an actor to get that kind of intensity, to just like sit on a train or at a dinner table or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I was just drawn to it. Is all
mm-hmm.
I was mentioning. Like,
yeah. No, it really is. He is like a presence, even if he's not in a shot, and he's sitting at the table where they're not looking at him. You almost still feel that glare happening, even though he's not even in the shot. Which is definitely good. Yeah, he does have quite an impact. I thought her name is Christina, right?
I believe so.
It's another person. It's another family member living in the house. I thought she was pretty good too. I think she felt fairly realistic to the circumstances, and they gave her surprisingly kind of an arc, which I wasn't really anticipating, just because like she's a woman in a 70s movie.
She's such a side character.
And she is, yeah, she's a side character. She's there to serve a purpose in a lot of ways, but they still give her an arc. She has a real actual story and her own traits and characteristics and even flaws. Like all of it is really there, which is something you don't always expect out of a 70s movie. Especially one that, like, again, she's so secondary to for the most part. What did you think about George Romero's performance?
Who George Romero? Oh, he's barely in it.
He's barely in it, yeah.
I don't know, it's fine. Why'd you like it?
I thought it was ridiculous. Not bad at all, but definitely ridiculous.
It's funny.
Yeah, it is funny. It does serve a purpose too, like to some of the messaging of the movie.
Yeah, to help you know what the theme of it is.
Yeah,
and to help you
mm-hmm.
Guided through the movie's ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought it was pretty good.
I actually, and I liked this last time.
Mm-hmm.
The actress that played Miss Santini.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think that's her name. Yeah.
Her role is basically she's sad, and I completely buy how sad she is. That's all. Like she's like, here's a character in the movie that's supposed to be sad, and I'm like, yep.
Mm-hmm.
She's doing it. She's killing that sad role.
She has there's a couple of other things that she does that are important to the story as well. She's definitely not a main focus of this movie. But there are definitely a couple of things that you can say as far as like what's happening there. She is definitely important to several of the themes in the movie. Yeah, we paused off there to talk about something that's definitely a spoiler. Did you agree with that particular interpretation of her character?
To some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't say anything else about it
because
it's a spoiler.
Because it's definitely a spoiler.
So
everything about that character is a spoiler.
So
moving on. Yeah, it's another person. There's a lot of people in this movie. It goes through a lot of different characters.
In a way, they're just very small.
Most of them,
roles. Yeah. It's mostly Martin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the people he kind of interacts with.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting that way, actually.
Mm-hmm. So before we talk about, like, comparatively what this movie felt like the first time and felt like the second time, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, like, with this movie? I know we can't talk directly about very much of it without, I don't know, kind of ruining a lot of it.
Right. No, not specifically.
Okay. So comparatively, were there things that felt different, or did the movie feel any different? Were there things that you picked up more on the second time watching it than you did the first time?
Maybe some of the earlier scenes.
Uh-huh.
Because just from the first scene, you kind of don't know
what's happening.
Yeah, and I had never heard much about this movie before I started watching it.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning scenes, you kind of get where the movie's going more.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of understand why things are shot the way they're shot.
Mm-hmm.
But really, that's the only, for me, I feel like that was the biggest and close to only difference I had in feeling and like understanding of the movie.
Mm-hmm. I felt like I should have given it more time. I've spent a lot of time since I've done this since I reviewed this the first time. I feel like I spent a lot of time thinking about this and comparing it, especially after watching The Transfiguration, which I watched much more recently, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking about this one, and I have tried to keep in mind the ones that I really enjoyed, so that one day, one episode or something, I could talk about, what I felt like was the best of the best as far as what we watched this year. And, both of those are on the list, actually. But I feel like I watched it too soon, and a lot of the emotional impact of it was kind of lost on me the second time, even though I was aware of all the same things. I think I was also much more compelled by what was happening to try to figure out what was going on the first time that I watched it more than the second time, obviously, because I already knew where it went. I remembered everything except for that one scene. I kind of remembered. Did you feel any of that? Did you lose any of that?
I actually didn't lose any of that.
Did you appreciate it more the second time?
Especially going into the end, I didn't think it was going to have as much impact on me.
Right.
As it did. And it totally did. Like,
did it?
I was like, I know what's happening now. It's going to happen. I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Shit.
Oh, no. I did definitely notice more of the flaws, but that's something that'll happen, anytime you rewatch any movie, you're gonna pick up on more flaws. I still think that this is a really important movie, and I still think it's one of my favorite things that I've seen for this whole thing. Whether I would definitely call it my absolute favorite having rewatched it, I don't know. There are definitely some rough edges on this movie. There are some things that feel like problems that maybe more budget could have solved. The lighting, I really felt like could have used a little bit more nuance, maybe in some of the scenes. But I do really, really appreciate this one. And this is definitely one of my favorite vampire movies that I have ever seen. And I really like vampires. I feel like I've mentioned that on the podcast.
I probably feel the opposite of you. I probably don't like it more than the first time, but it
it just reminded you how good it was.
Yeah, how much I did actually like it.
I don't think that ever left my mind, is why.
I don't think it really did either, but it was like cemented by watching it again.
Right.
Be like, yeah, I did like that, and I do think this is really good.
Yeah.
And the rough edges on this really don't bother me at all.
No, me neither, really.
I think it adds to it in the way of being kind of a period piece, and just the way people thought at the time, even
the way ideas were presented, and
you get it feels so late 70s.
It does. I really like that about it too.
Me too. And I think a lot of the problems come from the way film was made at that time, and it being and it being low budget.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody spared lighting on a budget this movie in the late 70s.
Exactly.
It wasn't even a thought. That's the first thing to go.
So, yeah, I don't know. Something about it, something about the feel, like, even thinking of it being, like, a little bit more, like, well-lit / cut together a little better, I would think it would be weirder after watching it twice now.
More polish would be weird for you?
Yeah, because the whole thing lacks polish, and that's kind of part of the theme / story.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I don't know. It's hard to think about these intangible ideas of what ifs.
Right.
But if I had to, which is what you were talking about, that's would be my feeling on it.
Yeah. See, I think because I watched the Transfiguration is a much more polished movie. And I feel like there are so many themes and similarities between these movies, which, like I said, are acknowledged similarities, that I feel like I've seen this movie with more polish, and it was good. So I think it is, I don't mind that this one doesn't have polish. It is a different movie. Like you said, it's very reflective of its period, and I really appreciate that aspect of it. I do really like that. That said, there are still things that even in the 70s probably could have been done better, even on, this basic budgetary level. It's funny because the things that I feel like on low budget movies are usually a problem weren't as much of a problem. Like, if anything, like usually lighting, in movies, if anything, it's like super dim. Maybe that's just more these days because of the way, I don't know, camera optics work more, on digital film versus, what would this have been? 8 millimeter?
I don't know. There's some film stock. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
It could have been it could have been like 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter, 34 millimeter.
357 Magnum.
No, that wasn't a shot on that.
Super 78? I don't think this was Super 78.
No, probably not. That's like a weird...
Yeah.
That's like a weird film.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know it is.
He said.
That's why I said it. That's why I said it after 357 Magnum. Because we're talking about millimeters.
I forget how funny you are sometimes.
I know, I'm so funny, and it's just all lost on you. It's really a shame.
But regardless, it was shot on film.
Yeah.
So that would makes a difference with
optics.
Color.
Yeah, color temperature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, the acting, which again, like John Amplas, this was the very first thing he was ever in. Like that was sort of surprising to me, even though of course he's weird, but his character is weird, so it totally works for it. Like, I'm sure that this guy isn't playing himself too. It doesn't feel like watching him. He's just playing a version of himself, which is something that you see a lot with first-time actors or fifth-time actors, or Will Smith.
Or Mark Wahlberg.
Or Mark Wahlberg, playing a version of himself and everything. Except for when he played a science teacher, and that was a disaster.
That was him as a science teacher.
I know. It wasn't, though. God.
What is it?
Oh, boy.
Now there's a good movie. All right, what are we talking about?
We're talking about how acting is often something that isn't super great in these low-budget movies, but the acting in this is, I think, one of the stronger points in it. I think, like I said, seeing Martin played by another actor would be really, really weird. I'm sure now that, George Romero is, gone and stuff, they will consider remaking that. They've already remade the Dawn of the Dead movies, several of them. He's been making those things, he made them up until pretty much the day he died, but they were remaking the series behind him as he was continuing to make more of his own films. I feel like Martin is probably going to move up on a lot of people's lists as far as remakes, and I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I'm not saying that it couldn't be done well, because the Transfiguration proves that a modern, polished version of this story could definitely work. But I think if you attach the Martin name to it, to me, it's going to have a certain thing to live up to, like a certain expectation and level of something that would be sort of a high bar. Like I said, this is one of my favorite things that I've seen for this entire project. Definitely top 10. I think the one that I actually liked the most was The Man Who Laughs, but that's not a horror movie. So I didn't want to rewatch that one and re-review it, because I've already talked about it on the podcast. I've already reviewed it once before that. And it's not a horror movie.
We semi-reviewed it on the podcast.
We did, that's what I'm saying, yeah. Okay. We had already done that, so rewatching that would not have been, like, a very good thing, since we've already talked about it on the podcast. So
yeah, a remake of this would have to be a completely different thing.
Yeah.
It'd be so hard to recreate the feel of this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it, like, special.
Yeah,
because it has
absolutely.
a really different feel than I can't think of another movie that really feels this way and that, like, is up to the same par. There's a lot of, low budget 70s, 80s movies that have, like, visual similarities, but they don't reach their goodness is usually within like campiness.
Right.
And this isn't
There's no
that.
camp.
Yeah, this isn't a campy movie at all.
Yeah. Which a lot of George Romero fans might be surprised to hear. But there's really no camp in this movie. There's camp in pretty much all of his movies in one way or another, but this one, I there's stuff that doesn't necessarily hold up super well, maybe, in certain respects, I guess. One group of scenes in particular, I think really doesn't hold up, but yeah, I mean, there's no camp value to this at all. It's not trying to. It's a very serious toned movie, and it takes itself seriously, and you take it seriously, or at least, I very much did.
Yeah, the message of the movie is very serious. The theme of the movie is very serious. Mm-hmm. There's a decent amount of moments of lightheartedness. Yes, but everything they're saying and doing is earnest. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of really interesting in that way. Mm-hmm. Especially for the time, a lot of B movies and stuff like that are just like ridiculous movies. Mm-hmm. And this is like the exact opposite of that. Mm-hmm. And some of those movies are great too, but this movie it's just more different. Special for that reason. Mm-hmm. Anything that has this like level of severity is usually a higher budget movie for the time. Mm-hmm. Right.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about for this one?
Not really.
Okay. Who would you recommend this one to? Is there anybody specific that you think would really like this movie?
I feel like if you really like Night of the Living Dead, like I really feel this has a lot of the same things that I love about Night of the Living Dead. Mm-hmm. So I feel like if you like that, you would like this. It's not like a big gore special effect driven movie. It's about
people.
It's about people, and it's like a character study of Martin. Mm-hmm. Where Night of the Living Dead's like a bottleneck episode of a movie. Like there's some gore, and then all of a sudden it's people. Yeah, a bottle episode. It's people in a house for 40
an hour.
minutes to an hour, and that's the movie.
Uh-huh. I don't feel like you necessarily have to enjoy Night of the Living Dead a lot to like this one.
I didn't say you had to, but I feel like it would help.
I just wanted to punctuate that for other people out there who don't as much care for it. And I probably do need to rewatch Night of the Living Dead just by myself, because it's been a lot of years since I've seen it, and people talked it up so much that could have been a lot of the problem. By the time I actually got around to seeing it, it was too hyped. But yeah, I think any fan of vampires, really should see this movie, even if this isn't their normal style of vampire, this like sort of almost, approaching real world approach. There's no real gothic elements to most of the movie. There's a little bit of that, of course. And in fact, maybe there's a little more of it than the surface value, like average screenshot from this movie would show.
Is what?
Like a gothic atmosphere.
I think there's
a grouping of scenes that
there's an amazing modern gothic atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's kind of its own
true
look at gothic imagery. Mm-hmm. With like old buildings, but not
gothic.
Not gothic era.
Period.
Yeah, period buildings.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that
visually
I really like about this movie.
Mm-hmm. There's also, if you like movies with social commentary, there's a ton of meat to this story. There's a lot of commentary, and I definitely did, the second time around watching it, I did find more nuance. Now, going into it, now that I knew the themes to look out for, there's stuff even early in the movie that I wasn't picking up on originally because it wasn't fully established in my mind what they were going for here. Watching it from the beginning with those themes in mind, there's a lot that adds to it. There's a surprising amount of depth and nuance to this for, again, a George Romero piece, and he did write and direct this movie, so it is really impressive. Now, pretty much all of his movies have some form of social commentary, even the Of the Dead movies, even the sort of later ones, from what I understand, do have elements of that. I haven't seen a lot of the later ones, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of there are a lot of things in this that I really, really enjoyed. Just felt different. I think this movie is sort of unique, even with the Transfiguration, which I've mentioned 75 times, like how much I liked that and how similar in certain ways that is to this movie. I still feel like this is an important movie, and it's different than most things that I've seen. It does have a really nice atmospheric feel to it that's sort of indicative of that period of filmmaking. There's a lot of air to things. They aren't afraid to leave things without dialogue. The music is so weird.
It's reminiscent of a PBS special at times.
At times, yeah.
Which is very weird and sets an interesting mood.
It does,
not necessarily bad sometimes, but sometimes good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would like to watch the other version with the
other soundtrack.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just like a standard Hollywood soundtrack, or if it has like
I believe a band
and...
did it, but I can't remember what band. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Also, while we're talking about that, the band Soft Cell wrote a song.
About Martin
in 1983 or 5 or sometime. That's all. I love Soft Cell.
Yeah, and Martin. Soft Cell is great, and Martin is great.
I just wanted to mention it.
Now I have to look up the lyrics to that. That's interesting. So yeah, I guess look that up. Yeah, the soundtrack is super weird, but it feels very period. It kind of solidifies how like 70s this movie is. You have heard the soundtrack on other movies and probably not picked up on it or realized how odd it seems, because you'll hear the same soundtrack in horror movies and sci-fi movies and in comedies like from this period. It's really funny. Things that are similar to this. There are parts of it where it does feel like it kind of matches the mood, and then other parts where it's like, this is why would you put that over this? So, I don't know. So that's our review of Martin from 1978, and that's our episode. That's our 100th episode, or at least my 100th episode. Samuel, how many episodes have you been on, do you think?
Feels like a million episodes.
It's not been that many. It's not been that many. I should go back and count them, but then I'd have to actually listen to all of them, because sometimes you're only in the second half of them. So
I'm mysterious in my way.
You just poof appear out of nowhere. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. I know that technically by the time you get this, it won't even be Friday the 13th, but it counts for me. I wanted to watch the movie on Friday the 13th, and I wanted to do an episode on Friday the 13th, and I'm the only one who cares. So
yeah, that's true.
That's true. Yeah. So that was Martin. That was great. So now that I've gotten this had been something that I'd been planning for a little while. This 100th episode, I that's why I did one. That's why I had to do one. I felt like on my birthday, like do another review, because I wanted the 100th episode to also be the Friday the 13th episode. So that's that. I will say I am at this point. I do know what my release schedule will be. My days of releasing are going to be on the 13th and the 31st, because those are really easy for me to remember, even though they're not exactly 2 weeks apart or even like half a month apart. That's the ones I want to remember, or that's the ones I want to release it on. And I'm going to take a month. Your first episode when I come back will be dropping on, or at least the first planned episode. If there's something in between there, I might do something if I feel like it. But the first actual planned scheduled episode will be on May 13th. And then following that, it'll be May 31st. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and whatever the two of you who listen, I really appreciate it. I'm going to take some time off and not do reviews and see what it's like to like read books again and like get full amounts of sleep sometimes and all of that. Possibly try to do other things. I think it was really important for me to have done this, especially to have actually made it the full year. I know I didn't do a year's worth of podcast episodes because I did the text reviews before I did any of that, but it was something that I think weirdly was surprisingly instrumental in me getting my shit together in like other areas and finally doing stuff that I've been like trying to do for 7 years and been unhappy and all of that stuff. So, yeah, it's weird to think that something like that, like just a small daily routine of some kind, could be really instrumental in that, but I think it really was. So thank you for being a part of that in whatever way that you have been, if you have been. And if you haven't been, thanks anyway for just like being around and hearing my voice right now and not being completely annoyed by it, which I assume Sam is.
It's true.
Yeah.
No, not completely.
Do you agree that this in some way, because Sam has been around a lot this year, Sam has watched a lot of these movies with me, even before I was doing the podcast. Do you think this helped me get my shit together at all?
I have no idea what your problem is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, are you on your birthday this year? Are you going to try to get your shit together? Are you going to do something to get your shit together?
Not at all.
No.
I want to lose more of my shit on my birthday together.
Yeah, I know. I knew you were going to do that. Sam hates his birthday. Sam super hates his birthday. Was there anything else you want to talk about?
No, but I really enjoyed this film. Out of all the movies and stuff I've seen, with you doing this, this is probably on the top like 10. I'd be surprised if it didn't make top 10. Probably maybe even top 5.
Me too.
It was just something I knew very little about.
Mm-hmm. I know I wanted to watch a vampire movie, and I was like, "We're watching this," and you're like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "It's a vampire movie by George Romero. Shut up, watch it."
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know he made vampire movies.
Like he doesn't. Watch it.
So it was quite a surprise how interesting it was, and the more people don't talk about it. After seeing it like a few months later, there was a Red Letter Media video about it.
Oh yeah.
And
Did you watch that? Have you seen it? Yeah,
I've seen it.
Okay.
And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting.
Did they not get it?
No, they got it, and it's good if you've seen it, because they don't spoil the whole thing, but they spoil a lot of it.
Yeah, all of their reviews. You should watch it before you.
Usually do, but it was interesting that they were talking about it too, and kind of saying that it's like underappreciated, and
oh, definitely.
That's exactly how I feel about it. So
it's very underappreciated,
if you haven't
especially
seen it,
coming from such a big name.
If you haven't seen it, try to find it. If you know what I mean.
It's probably out there somewhere.
Yeah,
it's probably out there in the ether somewhere. Yeah. This was a really good one. That's why I wanted to do this one. Like there were other things that I was looking at doing. There were a couple of other plans for what I wanted to do for this day, including watching Friday the 13th, which I actually don't know if I've ever seen the original one, but I didn't have the time to really try to get it. Yeah, I know you have. I'm a Freddy girl. I'm not a Jason girl. Samuel, are you a Jason girl?
No. I do like Jason though.
Yeah.
But I also like Freddy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Bitch.
Yeah. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That was one of the plans that I had. I was also going to go see a movie in the theater, which if you exist in reality right now, you probably know which movie in the theater I would probably have been planning to see. But I was too tired, and I have to work super early tomorrow and should really fucking stop doing this podcast right now. But yeah, this was one of my favorite things. I definitely had been wanting to rewatch it. I am glad that I did rewatch it. I'll probably give it a little bit more time the next time I do, or at least stop thinking about it quite as often.
Before you rewatch one?
Yeah, before I rewatch. Not necessarily that I rewatch one that I think is good, but before I rewatch this one.
Oh, okay.
Specifically, because there are definitely a couple that I know, like, a rewatch would be only good for it. Like, I didn't know whether this would be good or bad for it particularly. I don't think it really was bad for it. It just, like, kind of, I didn't get the same emotional impact of it because I knew every single detail of everything except for that one tiny thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't quite as mysterious the second time around because I knew where it was going. That's another thing that, I know we're done with this review already, but that's another thing that's really interesting is, like, you don't know scene to scene where it's going. Like, it kind of feels like, where are we going now? Like, you're just following him around and you never know what's going to happen next. Because it could really go any one of a number of directions, and it wouldn't be at all surprising. It's not like, you know that this happened, so in the next scene this is going to happen. Very rarely does that actually. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, a lot
unpredictability.
Of this is watching so many movies.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them are very formulaic, even if they're good.
Uh-huh.
This one, and knowing very little, like I was saying,
uh-huh,
also made it be like, oh wow, this like went in a completely different direction and idea than I
anticipated.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the very final part of our review of Martin from 1978, and that's our episode. So thank you so much for listening this whole time. If you would like to help out the best podcast.
The best podcast.
If you would like the best podcast, I just got like real big for my britches. A movie review podcast where we don't do any research.
A not very good movie review podcast.
Yeah, is the best podcast now. I'm too big for my britches. If you would like to help out the podcast, the best thing that you can do is to share this with someone that you love or someone that you think is interested in horror movies. The episodes will be quite a bit less frequent, which I think makes it easier for some people and less intimidated for people to get out of, be like, just let them know, hey, it's not daily episodes anymore, so don't freak out that you're going to get like 700 hours behind. Which is really easy to do because you just have to take a week off and you're 700 hours behind. If you would like to share it and the person that you're sharing it with doesn't have the same platform as you, or if you don't like the platform on which you found us, we are available on Player FM, YouTube, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much any podcatcher out there. You can reach out to us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or you can email me at reclusehorror@gmail.com. Sam, did you have any final thoughts or any ratings?
I was thinking it's probably like a 9.5 on the Sam scale.
A 9.5 on the Sam scale.
Yeah, it's pretty high up there.
Yeah, it's very good.
And there's only a few things that keep it from being a 10 in my scale, and this isn't like a scale of this movie's a 10, everybody will love it. This is a 9.5 because I like it.
Yeah.
This is my opinion and my scale.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't think that overall it has a 9.5 out of 10 for every audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
It has a 9.5 on the Sam scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I got that. I'm kind of torn between rating this like 75.5 celery stalks or 6 3/4 radio jockeys.
Radio jockeys. We gotta go so jokey with everything.
I don't know. This is really good. I think I've demonstrated that I think this movie is really good. It's not a perfect movie, and it's probably not something that everybody would enjoy for like a number of reasons. There are things that people wouldn't like about it, but again, I really hate assigning a numerical value, like a real numerical value, to any movie. I think that diminishes like the idea that people have different opinions. Like you said, like you gave it a 9.5 out of 10, clearly out of 10 on your scale, but you felt the need to say this is on the Sam scale. This is like 9.5 as far as I like movies. And that's how I feel. I could probably think about it and assign it a real number out of 10 for me. But I just feel like that diminishes the value. I think there's a lot to it. And I know we've talked about that. That's why we do these dumb shitty review, like celery stalks and stuff like that, like ratings, but I don't know. I really like this movie. It's real good. It's real good on the scale.
Thanks for listening, everybody. That was the Rambling Podcast.
Samuel.
At Podcasts.
Yeah.
Good Friday, everybody.
Good Friday. Happy Friday the 13th. Sam ruined my podcast.